Trump is making some bold moves on the international front, and his tough talk is drawing strong reaction worldwide.
That's right. Tonight we are getting a new look at how he will tackle some of the biggest foreign policy challenges facing the U.S. Okay, political reporter today, Bryan joins us now with the word that leaders don't really know what to make of these policy changes. A lot of people scratching their heads tonight.
Absolutely, and I think we can say without fear of contradiction that if Donald Trump wanted to get the world's attention, I think he has succeeded, at least to that extent. Talk may be cheap, but President Trump has been talking up a storm this week, and tonight that storm appears to be growing. From his insistence that nothing is off the table when it comes to retaliating Iran's ballistic missile test this week, to a pretty sharp change in a White House statement on Israeli settlements, Donald Trump has certainly gotten the world's attention. President Trump at the National Prayer Breakfast in Washington reportedly held a meeting on the sidelines of the event with Jordan's King Abdullah II. A few hours later, the White House released a statement on Israeli settlements on the occupied West Bank, warning the Israeli Prime Minister not to rush into new construction. While we don't believe the existence of settlements is an impediment to peace, the construction of new settlements or the expansion of existing settlements beyond their current borders may not be helpful in achieving that goal. The White House said President Trump hasn't taken an official position on the settlements yet, but during the campaign he offered his unquestioning support for Israel with no limitations. Oklahoma Senator James Lankford had this reaction to the White House statement.
We don't want Israel to engage in something that's going to be a detriment to peace, but at the end of the day, Israel and the Palestinians have to be able to come to the table to be able to resolve it.
Since President Trump was inaugurated just a couple of weeks ago, more than 3,000 homes for Israeli settlers have been approved for construction, which CBS News reports is illegal under international law. Palestinian leaders like Husma Zamlat are hoping that Trump's reputation for pragmatism is now prevailing.
He's a businessman. He knows that if you actually go and give the other side all they want, then they will have no interest for a deal.
The world is in trouble, but we're going to straighten it out, okay? That's what I do. I fix things.
At the National Prayer Breakfast, President Trump presented himself as the fixer, the tough, no-nonsense answer for America's international problems, including Iran, against which the administration is now considering new sanctions after it carried out very provocative ballistic missile testing.
President Trump, military action off the table in Iran?
Nothing's, honestly, nothing is off the table.
An Iranian senior advisor responded by saying the country will vigorously continue with its missile activity. Now, the Wall Street Journal reports the Trump administration is set to impose fresh sanctions on dozens of Iranian companies, individuals, and military organizations as early as Friday. And there were widespread reports about hard feelings after a Trump phone conversation with Australia's Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull. The president objected to an agreement made during the Obama administration under which some 1,250 refugees being held in Australian detention centers would be moved to the U.S. CNN reports Trump called it a bad deal and abruptly hung up.
The previous administration does something, you have to respect that. But you can also say, why are we doing this? That's why we're in the jams that we're in.
My reaction is one of sorrow. Australia has been just great to the United States, and it is a treasured relationship.
U.S. relations with Mexico have also deteriorated over the border wall and Mr. Trump's pledge to redo the North American Free Trade Agreement, NAFTA.
I don't care if it's a renovation of NAFTA or a brand new NAFTA, but we do have to make it fair.
I know this was a hotly contested election, and we do not all feel the same way about the outcome.
In what may be the understatement of the year, Secretary of State Rex Tillerson tried to rally employees of the hard-pressed State Department, where about 900 people reportedly signed an internal memo protesting President Trump's executive order imposing a travel ban on immigrants from 7 Muslim countries and refugees. Well, President Trump has been very critical of the nuclear agreement between the U.S. and Iran. Tonight, the Wall Street Journal reports some Iran experts are concerned that the Trump administration's words and actions could trigger a new crisis in the Persian Gulf. Obama administration officials often claimed unless an agreement was reached, the U.S. and Iran would be at serious risk of war. Jeff?
Yeah, Dave, with more on that, President Trump certainly has a lot of tough talk for the allies and for the enemies alike.
Yeah.
So what do you think the strategy is in that?
Well, there definitely is a strategy here, I think. I think the point is, as one of Trump's supporters said today, there's a new sheriff in town, and you better understand that things have changed, including U.S. foreign policy. The danger of that tough approach is that at some point, somebody out there will probably challenge Trump, whether it's North Korea, China, or Iran, to name a few, to find out whether this is just more bluster or how far the president will go to make his point when the talking stops. And if in the process he continues to alienate longtime allies as well as enemies at the rate he's going now, he may not have many other countries standing with the U.S. when it's crunch time, and that could be very dangerous, Jeff.